myself and just plain crazy. There's a wealth of empirical data about the industry as to why it's so hard. So I'm really not going to go into it. Whether or not restaurants close 90% of the first year or 70% the year after is kind of not the point. The point is we know it's a hard industry. Yet despite the challenges that we face, the industry is still a key driver of employment, gross national product, taxable income, and probably something very important is often overlooked, social and community interaction. So just to talk briefly about the American hospitality industry. It's very dynamic, it's a very changing industry. I'll just read some interesting statistics to you, or some facts that kind of embrace how dynamic this industry is. In America, the industry employs 13.5 million people. That's over 10% of the entire workforce of America. In the last 5 years, 28% more 28% more women, 30% more Hispanics, and 70% more African Americans have become restaurant owners. One new job is created every 2 minutes. And in the next 2 years, over 10 million jobs will be created in America in the hospitality business. The actual sales of the industry are greater than the agricultural industry, the motion picture industry, and the airline industry all combined. In fact, somebody sat down in the Restaurant Association in America, and they did an analysis, and they worked out that if the industry was a country, it would actually be the 17th largest economy in the world. Over 135 million Americans are served every single day. To put it in perspective, that's over twice the population of the United Kingdom. Half of every single American has worked at a restaurant, and 80% of all frontline managers at restaurants came up from the bottom, from the kitchens or from the floor. And by the end of 2014, there will be nearly 1 million restaurants with annual sales of over $668 million. So it's clearly a very dynamic industry, but it's also a changing industry. It changes in many areas, as do most, and a lot of things that affect everybody here in the hospitality and the restaurant business either are affecting us now or have affected us before. Legislation is an interesting one, and I was interested to see here on the MC report the issue of tip skimming that's hard to legislate here, or hard to control, hard to implement. In America, we've gone through all of that, where companies, corporations have got in trouble or been challenged, not by the authorities, but actually by the employees themselves. A massive class actions have taken place in America that really have affected, resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements against employers in America. Legislation is changing all the time in America. And one of the big problems that we face with changing legislation is it changes so fast, enforcement is inconsistent. So you can have an authority, an inspector come and visit you today about a certain health and safety issue, and then in 2 weeks pass you, and then 2 weeks later, another one will come along and give you a ticket for exactly the same thing that was passed by the first. There's nothing you can do because the legislation is moving way faster than the association, the authority's ability to implement it. Technology is a big impact on our industry. It's a big changing impact. For us in America, it's less about iPad ordering or online ordering systems. It's far more about the technologies that are available being written today that can overlay from the hotel, from the reservation systems, from the booking systems, that actually give us pinpoint information about our clients. We can actually zero in to what they ate, when they ate, where else they ate the same thing, what they spent, how much they tipped, what other of our venues they went to, as well as general specific information of their demographic and what they did and how they acted in every other market or restaurant they went to. This really, as operators, gives us a very powerful tool to really target and market into the areas that we need to. Labour law and minimum wage is a big impact on operating in America. As we know, the industry is probably one of the lowest paid industries around the world, and we are continually facing increases in minimum wages, as well as increases in labour law regulation, which, as I mentioned before, as evidenced on the MC report, is now becoming a legislative issue for us in defending our position as operators against groups of employees and litigating lawyers that really feel there's a good chance of going after something. The other biggest challenge that we face in our industry is Obamacare. It comes from the top end of the government itself, where President Obama is adamant that they're going to try and find a level playing field for the healthcare system in America, which clearly they need to do, because it's the hospitals and the doctors that are really taking advantage, because everything's covered under the insurance programs. A lot of Americans don't even have any health insurance or no health care. The problem with Obamacare is if it was enforced in its original setup, it would have wiped out a massive percentage of small and medium-sized business, particularly our industry, because we are so labour-intensive. And to be honest, the majority of businesses, and certainly small and medium-sized businesses out there, would not have been able to afford Obamacare. So, having mentioned a little bit to you about how dynamic the industry is and some of the changes that are happening, the best way for me to tell you about operating a restaurant in America is to tell you my story. Because if I tell you my story, it will kind of help to set the scene on how we expanded in America fairly quickly. Over 7 years that we've been expanding, half our life was in recession. Not only recession, it was the worst recession I know everybody here's ever lived through. And furthermore, the hospitality industry is the first industry that gets affected by a recession. As soon as it happens, people stop eating out. And yet we were able to grow our business. I went to America in November 2001, and I took with me a concept that we created in the island of Jersey, where we had a hotel company, and it was called Rock Galaxy. And the idea about Rock Galaxy was it was a venue that you could go to for drinks after work, stay for dinner, and gradually, as the night progressed, the lights would go down, the music would go up, and the place that you arrived was not the place that you left. In fact, by 11:30 in the early 90s, everybody was still on tables and chairs doing the YMCA. So when I went to in 2001, the first thing I did was spend the next year and a half literally walking around New York, learning the American way. Because there's a lot of faster, clever, smarter people than me have gone to America and have been absolutely consumed by the American way. It really is a tough place to do business, but nothing is tougher than doing business in New York. So I really felt that we needed to learn what we were doing. So that's the first takeaway on running a business in America. You have to really learn and research before you take advantage of thinking you can go into the market. We opened our first venue in January 2004. It was called One, and instead of selling burgers and beer that we sold in Rock Galaxy, we did fine dining and served bottles of vodka and fine wine. It turned out to be very successful, but it didn't make any difference. We didn't want to expand. We didn't want to expand at least for a year to 2 years, because it wasn't enough just to go there and think you understand the market or to think you know how to do it. There's a difference between understanding and experience. And what we really needed to do was to focus in on the American way to make sure that the best of the British hospitality that we took over could be moulded to suit with the best of what America had to offer. In 2006, we decided to expand. We found another piece of property in the meatpacking district of New York, and we opened STK. STK was a complete paradigm shift to the steakhouse. The steakhouse really in America hasn't changed for 200 years. The oldest restaurant and the most boring. In fact, in 200 years, the only thing that's any different is the wood panelling's got woodier, the red wine's got red, and the portions have got larger. So having created this vibe-driven dining, vibe dining in One, we needed to see if we could migrate it into something more simple. Our first restaurant was too complicated. People would come and sit down and would say, "Hi, how are you? Have you eaten before? Can I tell you what it's all about?" And I would sit there cringing and I would think, "No, let me tell you. I'll order, you fire it, the chef will cook it, the runner will bring it, I'll eat it and I'll pay." If it's anything more complicated than that, I'm in the wrong place. We thought about steak. What can you do about steak? It's easy, we understand it, we know what we're going to get, we know what it looks like, we much know what it's going to taste like. So we merged that with fine dining. I was interested to hear what the guys said before, the pizza guys, and I think Red said it as well. You just don't worry about focusing on the food. Everyone's going out to eat for a great meal. So the food's got to be great. Once you know your food's great, you can focus on everything else. We wanted to bring that vibe dining into the steakhouse business. We wanted to take the business tie out and put the girl in. We wanted to take the business chatter out and put the music in. So we created STK, built our bars with DJs, so that we could really exercise on our idea. But we didn't want to take a knife to a gunfight. So I went to Wall Street and I found 50 investors, each that could put up $50,000. And I was less interested in their money and way more interested in the size of the Rolodex that they had. Because if I'd got it wrong, and if America wasn't prepared to embrace an attack on their steakhouse model, then at least I would have a fallback with these guys that hopefully would support it and bring a ton of their guests and their friends there. The reality is it was hugely successful. So we now had a success. But it means nothing. When you have one of something, it means absolutely nothing. You never know how good your product is until you have 2, 3, 4, 5. So we had to work out exactly how we were going to expand the product. Now in America, you can expand 3 ways. You can go vertically down the corridors, all down the eastern coast, Boston, New York, down to Atlanta, onto Miami. You can go down the central corridor, you can go down the west coast, Florida, San Francisco, LA, San Diego. Alternatively, you can go to the diamond, or the triangle. You can go coast to coast, New York, LA, and then down to Miami, and then infill from there. We had decided, because we had limited access to capital, that we weren't really going to be able to expand our brand on a corridor, and we felt also that the best way to do it was to create global recognition. There's no better way to create global recognition for a restaurant brand than go to Los Angeles. It's one of the hardest markets that you can trade in, but Los Angeles comes with one thing in its back pocket, and that is thousands and thousands of celebrities. And if you can capture the imagination of the celebrities and they'll frequent your place and they'll embrace it, then you will provide tons of editorial for your brand. This is exactly what STK did. When we opened the second STK in Los Angeles, when we went to YouTube after the first year and Googled STK LA, we would get thousands of hits of celebrities coming and going, being videoed. It was in every 3 or 4 weeklies, 5 or 6 monthlies, and the editorial went around the world. Not only that, it was economically successful for us as well. So from there, we then went down to Miami to complete that triangle to infill with our brand. What was interesting about the Miami market is it's a very tourist-driven market. We had a city-style business in New York. We had a more loosey-goosey, celebrity-style market in Los Angeles, where there's a bigger emphasis on healthy food and healthy living, and we were still able to adapt our brand to suit that. And then we needed to see whether or not it would fit for the tourists and the holiday makers. The thing with Miami is it's a big American destination, it's a huge South American destination, and it's an amazingly big European and United Kingdom destination. We were successful there. Now, if you want to be a successful restaurant across America, ultimately, one day you've got to go to Las Vegas. When we opened STK in 2006, the beginning of 2007, we were approached by a number of casinos and asked whether or not we were interested in going to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is the greatest restaurant capital of the world and by far the greatest hospitality capital of the world. In Las Vegas, they can get money out of your pocket without you realizing it's happening. So we weren't really confident to go to Las Vegas too early. Las Vegas is like Madonna. It can reinvent itself and does so every few years. Up until the early 90s, Las Vegas was really 100% about gaming. In the 90s, in a desire to attract business from each other's casinos, there was a retail revolution. Everybody was into retailing, and all the casinos were building these amazing shopping complexes. In fact, I think one of America's biggest and most successful per square foot sales in the shopping market, on a shopping mall, is the Forum Shops in Caesars Palace. Then the casinos went after the family market. They decided that if we can put fun fairs and playgrounds, we'll get the families to come, dad will gamble, and mum will look after the kids. Boy, did they ever make a mistake. What they overlooked was the fact that dad actually wants to hang out and play with the kids as well. So that all went by the way. In 2004, the Venetian Hotel was the first casino in the history of Las Vegas to make more money from hospitality than it made from gaming. And that marked a sea change in Las Vegas. In 2006, a nightclub opened called Pure Nightclub in Caesars Palace, and it did $55 million of revenue in 25,000 square feet. Today, there's over 3 nightclubs in America, in Las Vegas, that do over $100 million of revenue. In fact, these nightclubs and the hotels that they operate make more money, just the nightclub makes more money than they make on blackjack in all of these hotels. So now Las Vegas is becoming a major restaurant destination. It wasn't a major, before it was an important destination because the casinos would pay for everything. The casinos now woke up to that. They realise the value of their retail on the casino floor, and now they will not pay for everything, and they will not build out anything. You actually will end up paying a huge percentage of your gross revenue to them, because one of the things the casino is amazing at doing is marketing. They will drive revenue to you. As a result, without being too specific, because being a public company, my CFO tells me I can't be, but what I can tell you is in Las Vegas, 220 seats, in 8,000 square feet, we do well over $20 million of revenue, and is by far the most successful of our operations. So, having now established that we had a brand that had legs, we had to work out how we were going to go to the next stage. So here's the next thing that was important to take away from operating a restaurant in America. We had to decide whether or not we were going to become a multiple operator and have 20, 30, 40 of these things, which we believe would dilute our brand. Because, to be honest, SDK is a little bit special, but if there's 50 or 100 of them, it's kind of less special. So we could have created a secondary brand, which was a risk. Alternatively, we could have done what retail does all over the world. It does it unbelievably well. Create brand and under-brand. Donna Karan, DKNY, Armani Exchange. We created SDK Rebel. We didn't create SDK Grill or SDK Steak or SDK Burger, because that would have been a new concept. We created Rebel, like the naughty little sister of SDK. It's identical. The only difference being is the size and the metrics, and the decor is a little bit more rock and roll. So traditional SDK, up to date, to today's day, has done about $11–12 million of revenue per store. Moving forward, we're anticipating about $9 to $10 million. And the reason why it's a little bit less is some of the big boxes are already open. There's only so many cities in America that can handle 9,000 to 10,000 square foot stores. SDKs are 9,000 to 10,000 square feet. Rebels are 5,000 to 6,000. Average spend in an SDK is about $124. Liquor mix is about 43% liquor, 57% food. In Rebels, the Rebels are about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, about $5 to $6 million, and an average spend of about $55 to $65. So we really now created a brand that we could take everywhere. Because Rebel, you can put Rebel in every major city or every city across America. We didn't want to do that with SDK, because if we'd done that with SDK, then we would have found we were in a situation where we'd underplayed the brand. So SDK Rebel grew up in the sunlight of the main, or grows up in the sunlight of the main SDK. So what does it mean to run a restaurant in America? You know, what are some of my takeaways that I can give you, having explained to you a little bit about the industry and a little bit about how we did it. The first thing is define how you want to write your story. It's too big a country, and it's way too dangerous just to show up and think you can work it out as you go along. Decide whether or not you want to be a single concept operator with multiple price points, like SDK, whether you want to be a multiple brand operator. Decide in your mind how you want to expand your business. You know, do you want to go vertically through the corridors, or do you want to go horizontally from point to point and then expand from within? Do not believe what you hear first. Do not follow every real estate broker's advice. I promise you they're pretty much out there to see you coming and make a big buck off you. There's some classic examples of amazing British concepts that have gone to New York and have located themselves in the worst possible location you can imagine. Areas that no New Yorker would go to, even if it was free, and they're paying the price for that today. So it's really important that you understand what your market is and understand your city. To be honest, it's absolutely no different than going from London to Manchester, or from Manchester to Glasgow. You have the north-south divide. It's kind of no different. Just because they love you over here doesn't mean they're going to love you over there. There's plenty of examples of, and again, this equally applies here, expanding nationally in England, from what I understand, moving, as I said, from the south to the northern divide. You know, there was an amazing fast casual concept that went to America, and they opened 4 stores, and then they opened 16 stores, and they thought their name and their brand, they were so loved and their concept was so amazing, they could go on the streets of New York. Well, you have to be on the avenues. They could go on the streets. And the second year they shut 10 of their venues. They also worked out that the menu was wrong. Americans thought the packaging was too small. They didn't like the packaging. They thought the content was small. They didn't like so much mayonnaise in the sandwiches. They've now got it right and they're expanding tremendously. But they're focusing, and they have absolutely focused on vertical integration down the East Coast. Question and keep questioning, and research and research. Again, anything I'm saying to you here is no different anywhere else. It's a little bit harder going over there because you have to learn something different about a country, but the same thing applies to everywhere else. Stick to your concept, but be adaptable. I want to tell you something interesting about America. America is not a country of 50 states. America is a country of 50 countries. There's actually only, in my view, there's only really 5 things that are in common state to state in America. They all use the dollar, they all pledge allegiance to the flag, they have the same national anthem, they all follow the federal government, and I forget what else it is. But each one each city is completely different. Here's a strange quirk about America. You can adhere to state law and break federal law. A classic example recently, marijuana. You can now smoke marijuana in Washington, state of Washington, and in the state of Colorado. In fact, in the state of Colorado, you can actually go to a shop, like in Amsterdam, you can buy a joint, you can buy marijuana, laced drinks, cookies, brownies, etc. Every time you do that, you're breaking federal law. When the law was passed and stores opened on the first weekend in America, they took $1.5 million, no bank would take the money. And there's very few banks today that will take the money because it breaks federal law. The reason I say this to you is when you expand around the country, you have to adapt your concept to work with the community, the city, the state that you're moving to. The way you operate in New York is completely different to the way you operate in Los Angeles. We play our music different, our staff interface different with the guests, the generality of the experience is slightly different, but the concept remains the same. So as I said, don't be flaky about your concept. I can't tell you how many times I've got really nervous about something and I thought maybe we shouldn't, and my colleagues have turned around and said, but we're SDK, this is what we do. So what we've done is really just adapted what we do in each city so that we cannot annoy them, because New Yorkers don't like LA concepts, Las Vegas don't like Miami concepts, but by being able to adapt your concept to suit your market, it puts you in a really strong position. Don't be intimidated. Just because it's America doesn't mean it's that great. I promise you this, and we all know some of the greatest music, some of the greatest poetry, art, stories, writers, filmmaking, and restaurant concepts have come out of this country, by far. I've been to so many amazing concepts that can hold their head up. Recently I was in Manchester. Here's a little bit of an outlook of somebody who I don't know, and I've never met him, and if he's here, hi, and if he walks into the room and bought me a drink, I wouldn't even know who he was. I went around Tim Bacon's Living Ventures, and I was absolutely enthralled by what I saw. And let me tell you about these concepts. Every one of the 8 concepts that I saw in the city of Manchester not only could hold its head up in America, it can absolutely hold its head up in New York and probably do very, very well. So do not be intimidated. We have some of the greatest concepts in this country that exist around the world. And I don't know what my time is, I don't know how much I've got left, but here's my last takeaway to everyone. My last takeaway as it relates to operating in America, as it relates to operating in England, as it relates to operating anywhere in the world. The best and the safest way to be a success is to surround yourself with the best. Thank you.
We have probably time for one quick question from the floor. I'll ask one quick question then. Jonathan, can you just take us into how female focus of SDK is, just very briefly on how you do that with SDK in the steakhouse?
Yeah, it's a lot to do with, there's nothing in an SDK that remotely looks like a steakhouse. Most steakhouses, as in most traditional restaurants, will actually put their bars in the front or in the side of the restaurant. We put our bars up front and centre and we build the bars around them. The reason being, all the energy comes from the bar. So whenever you're in an SDK, you're never more than 20, 30 feet from a bar. What that really means from the female, the social or the success side, is these become much more social environments. And whereas women were nervous about going to steakhouses, were not nervous, felt uncomfortable in steakhouses because they're the male domain. On average in America, it's about 70 to 75% men to women in a steakhouse. In an SDK, we're 55% women, 45% men, and most nights we're more tables of all girls and all guys. And part of the reason for it being is the menu is designed, we don't have crab cakes, we have crab salads, the menu is designed better, everything comes in small, medium, or not better, they're designed more for the more health conscious. Everything comes in small, medium and large, and we put a lot of emphasis on the social side of the dining. And really the social side of the dining is a really big part that helps us improve on the mix between men and women.
Thank you very much. Join me in thanking Jonathan. Alistair Murdoch has over 20 years' experience in the UK eating out sector. For the last 3 years, he has overseen the evolution of Gourmet Burger Kitchen. He's here to discuss how the brand continues to stay at the forefront